Good evening. Welcome to our Bible pondering for this week. Our text for this evening is Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28. For Jews in the ancient world, there were a few important traditions that they kept that differentiated them from the people around them. Other cultures had temple worship as well. They had festivals as well, things that the Jews did also, but these traditions really marked them out as different. The first was less obviously visible, and that was circumcision. The second thing that they did was keeping their kosher diet. The things that they eat, and especially the things that they didn't eat, really did mark them out as different. And the third was keeping the Sabbath. In those days, there were no weekends, there were no regular times off for anybody. And so that the Jews kept a day of the week to rest was novel and strange to everyone else and marked them out as different. And other cultures even described them as being lazy for doing so. So it was definitely something that marked them out. And the Sabbath really had quite strict and particular rules that had come to be attached to it. Things like how far you were allowed to walk from your house before it became too much work, or what you could or couldn't cook. In fact, mostly food was prepared on Fridays and kept as leftovers for the Sabbath, so there wouldn't be any danger of working accidentally by cooking. Following the Sabbath wasn't just about following the rules, though. It was important because it marked the people out from the rest of the world around them, and also because the idea of the Sabbath goes all the way back to God in the very act of creation. This was not seen as some new law even from Moses or from the Pharisees, but from the very example of God. It's kind of a big deal. So when we come to our text this evening, it's important to download all of that into this scene. So let's read Mark chapter 2, verses 23 to 28. One Sabbath, as he was going through the grain fields, and as they made their way, his disciples began to pluck heads of grain. The Pharisees said to him, "Look, why are they doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" And he said to them, "Have you never read what David did when he and his companions were hungry and in need of food? He entered the house of God when Abiathar the high priest was the high priest, and ate the bread of the presence, which is not lawful for any but the priests to eat, and he gave some to his companions." Then he said to them, "The Sabbath was made for humankind, and not humankind for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord, even of the Sabbath." This is a really important text for a few reasons. The first is Jesus' statement about being Lord of the Sabbath. As I said before the reading, the Sabbath comes directly from God. So for Jesus to say that he is the Lord of the Sabbath is a big claim. And that's something that maybe we'll unpack another day. The part I want us to focus on is the distinction he draws in the purpose of the Sabbath being for the people, not the people for the Sabbath. He is essentially saying humans weren't created only so they could follow the Sabbath, but the Sabbath exists for us, to give us rest. So my questions for today are these. Number one, what in our world and culture today gets turned upside down in the same way? What has become so important to us that we exist as if we exist only to do that thing? The second is what in our communities of faith, what in our churches has become like this? Do we have particular traditions or customs that in our churches become like the Sabbath, where we almost exist only to do them? Or maybe even church itself can become that? And number three, how can we counteract the urge to make customs and traditions become this sort of mandatory, us made for the tradition, not the tradition made for us kind of thing, and therefore lose their good? How can we counteract that urge to do that? If you're interested in thinking through these and other questions in a group, we're going to move straight into a Zoom call just now. The details for the Zoom call are in the comments below, so feel free to plug those in. I think we're all, or at least most of us, are getting used to going on to Zoom. So there's a link and the meeting ID and password will be in the comments below. So feel free to join us and bring your questions, bring your thoughts, and we'll do some discussion there just for half an hour or so. Thanks for joining us this evening.